Asanteni sana. Asanteni sana, University of Dar es Salaam Cultural Group. Professor John Owusu Gyapong, Secretary General, African Research Universities Alliance, Arua. Professor William Manangise, Vice Chancellor, University of Dar es Salaam. Esteemed Vice Chancellors from Tanzanian universities present here. Members of diplomatic operations and international organizations. Professor Nelson Boniface, Deputy Vice Chancellor Research from the University of Dar es Salaam. Deputy Vice Chancellors from the African Research Universities Alliance, Arua, members universities. Professor Saudin Mwakaje, Distinguished Guest Speaker of the 3rd Annual Distinguished Public Lecture of the African Research Universities Alliance. Principals, Deans, and Directors, distinguished guests, professors, faculty members, students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the University of Dar es Salaam, I wish to warmly welcome you to this important public lecture of our very own. We are delighted to have you here, and thank you very much for setting time to join us. My name is Amda George. I'm from the Communication and Marketing Unit of the University of Dar es Salaam. I'll be your host for today. Ladies and gentlemen, to go straight to the agenda of today, to begin, I have the honor of welcoming Professor Nelson Boniface, Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Research of the University of Dar es Salaam, to give introductory remarks. Karibu sana, Professor.
Professor William Manangise, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Dar es Salaam, Professor John Gyapong, the Arua Secretary General. Please allow me to say that the protocol is observed. Na wasalimia katika Jamhuri ya Muungano, kwa jina la Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania. We thank God for granting us this moment. It is my honor, on behalf of the University of Dar es Salaam, to offer these 4 words on this special 3rd Arua Annual Public Lecture, which was preceded by the annual meeting of the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the Arua. This dual occasion reflects Arua's noble agenda of building Africa's research capacity, positioning our institutions to be globally competitive, and most importantly, equipping us to finding lasting solutions to the development and the challenges of our continent. I'd like to inform you, Vice Chancellor, and all the guests, that yesterday we had a meeting of the Deputy Vice Chancellors from all across Africa, those who are Arua members, that we were discussing, deliberating the agenda of the Arua, which is actually anchored on making sure that our universities and the continents, they have solutions for our continent. The delegation was led by Professor John Gyapong, the Arua Secretary General. I'd like to introduce him to this public. Please stand up so that people can recognize you. And the Deputy Vice Chancellor from South Africa, please stand up, all of you together. From South Africa. Deputy Vice Chancellors from West Africa, please stand up and wave. from East Africa and Central. So the Arua has about 20 member universities, and yesterday we had an attendance of about 16. Others had some issues that they could not attend physically. And today's event, we have physical attendance, and there are those who are attending virtually, online. I'd like to inform you that as you see the gathering here, this period of the year, the university is at the low season, or I can say people are out at the university because we are supervising our students in practical training and industrial training. So most of the staff and the students are not around, but they are following the event virtually. After these remarks, I would like to thank the efforts done by the organizing committee that was led by Dr. Agustina, our Director for Internationalization, and the entire team. So everything that is happening, it was under her leadership. And I want to applaud the cultural group that you saw here this evening. Those are our gifted students, led by Dr. Dines Sanga, head of the Department of Creative Arts. Please stand up. People recognize you. And after these remarks, I would like to invite the Vice Chancellor to give the welcoming note to all the guests. Thank you for your kind attention.
Professor John Owusu Gyapong, Secretary General, African Research Universities Alliance, Arua, esteemed Vice Chancellors from Tanzanian universities present here today, members of the diplomatic corps and international organizations, Professor Nelson Boniface, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, University of Dar es Salaam, Deputy Vice Chancellors from the African Research Universities Alliance, Arua, member universities, Professor Saudini Mwakaje, Distinguished Guest Speaker of the 3rd Annual Distinguished Public Lecture of the African Research Universities Alliance, Arua, Principals, Deans, and Directors, distinguished guests, professors, faculty members, and students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the University of Dar es Salaam for this very special occasion. It is a great honor to host members of the African Research Universities Alliance, Arua, for the 3rd Annual Distinguished Public Lecture. This event underscores our strong commitment to intellectual exchange and international collaboration. With the utmost humility, I extend a warm welcome to everyone present, both those attending in person and those joining us virtually. I sincerely commend the commitment of the Arua Deputy Vice Chancellors for Research from the member universities, whose dedication made yesterday's meeting both fruitful and very inspiring. Special appreciation goes to our own Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, Professor Boniface Nelson, who ably hosted the meeting, and we are grateful for this productive engagement. We also extend our gratitude to Arua for selecting us as this year's host and for giving us the privilege of welcoming our distinguished speaker, Professor Saudi Mwakaje, Associate Professor of Law and Chief Corporate Counsel, who will share his insights on intellectual property rights, a subject that lies at the heart of academic governance and research integrity. Allow me also to recognize and extend a warm welcome to the Vice Chancellors of Tanzanian universities and other colleagues from nearby institutions who have honored us with their participation in this esteemed event. We value your presence and encourage your universities to consider joining Arua so that you too can contribute to and benefit from this strong continental research network. The University of UDSM is proud to be the sole Arua member from Tanzania, together with the other sister institutions in Central and Eastern Africa, Makerere University, University of Nairobi, University of Rwanda, Addis Ababa University, and the University of Kinshasa, an associate member. As many of you know, Arua supports African-led research by fostering interdisciplinary collaboration, promoting equitable resource distribution, and advancing progressive research policy. Membership opens the door to joint research initiatives, capacity building, knowledge sharing, increased access to research funding, and stronger international partnerships. Such engagement strengthens institutional research capacity, attracts talented scholars, and helps our universities contribute more effectively to national and international development. Dear participants, the goals of Arua are in harmony with the Tanzanian's Development Vision 2050 and our university's Vision 2061. These commitments are already integrated into a strategic plan. The University of UDSM has reaped significant benefits from Arua membership, including 1, enhanced research capacity through joint projects, strengthened international collaboration networks, increased opportunities for competitive funding, improved access to shared expertise and innovation platforms, and practical solutions to pressing challenges such as climate change and public health. Moreover, Arua's initiatives have directly enabled us to strengthen our ICT systems, expand research infrastructure, and build faculty and student research capacities. These contributions have enriched not only our university community, but also our wider society. Ladies and gentlemen, I once again warmly welcome all our distinguished guests, colleagues, students, and members of the public to this important lecture. I encourage you to engage actively, ask thoughtful questions, and make the most of this learning opportunity. Finally, I invite our guests from outside Tanzania to extend your stay to experience the beauty of our country, from the historic wonders of Zanzibar to our newly opened University of UDSM Museum, which showcases 6 decades of our rich history and contributions. Let us seize this occasion to build stronger partnerships, advance knowledge, and shape a brighter future for Africa through research and collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. I would like now to welcome again Professor Nelson Boniface to recognize our new guest who just arrived. Karibu.
Vice Chancellor, please allow me to recognize two guests. Major General Ibunge, this is Commandant National Defense College. Mpigie makofi mengi sana. I'd like to also recognize Commissioner Mela, who is representing Commissioner Mambosasa, this representative police college kula kusini. Karibuni sana, tunashukuru kwa kuja. Asante sana. And now, according to our timetable, it's my honor to welcome Professor Bola to the... sorry, I'm sorry. Okay. The timetable now is to welcome Professor John Gipong, Secretary General from Arua, for remarks from Arua. The stage is yours.
Vice Chancellor, Professor William Anisije, Vice Chancellors from other universities here in Tanzania, esteemed military commanders, Deputy Vice Chancellors from Arua institutions, and if I may say, all other protocols observed. It is indeed a pleasure for us to be here and have this public lecture. Arua is excited about the active participation of University of Dar es Salaam, and we do not take it for granted. Vice Chancellor, we are very grateful. And we want to acknowledge the immense organizational skills of your able Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Nelson Boniface, and his team for organizing this for us. We are indeed very grateful, and everybody, I believe, has been very happy with what has happened so far. It is an honor and indeed a privilege that the University of Dar es Salaam is hosting the third Arua annual lecture. As many of you would know, the annual lectures were instituted to stimulate discussions on very important issues, to ensure that as academics involved in research, we engage on things that are topical, but also broaden our discourse in academia. The first public lecture was delivered in 2023 in South Africa. It was delivered by one of our able academics in the person of Professor Salim Abdul Karim, who espoused a lot of experience and information on the HIV/AIDS pandemic and COVID as well. So he captioned his talk, we can take the lead in addressing our own health challenges. The second lecture was delivered by Professor Fumi Olusikani, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor from King's College, a professor of Nigerian origins. She also espoused for us the whole environment of our commitment to higher education space and how we can collaborate to work together as Arua institutions and beyond. Today we are excited that University of Dar es Salaam is giving us a very reputable individual who I believe will be introduced appropriately. But permit me to say that reading his bio, I was pretty much impressed with his work that he has done so far in the field of intellectual property rights, which is very relevant for us whose main focus is research. We are very much eager to hear what he has to share with us, and we'll have a discussion after that. Through these initiatives, Arua is able to bring so many academics to a common place, physically and more importantly, virtually, to ensure that the discourse on very relevant issues continue. As academics, we debate issues, we disagree, and find a common ground, and then eventually chart a pathway to address our challenges here in Africa. It is my sincere hope and belief that through this lecture, we will be able to have some insights into how to manage our IP issues in our various universities, and beyond that, affect the development of our countries and our continent in general. That our knowledge that we generate as academics would benefit us as a continent and lead to innovations and development within the African continent. With these few words, I wish to express Arua's gratitude to all of you for making yourself available to participate in this public lecture. And it is our hope and prayer that it will be a melting pot of very, very relevant information for our development. I thank you all for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have an honor to welcome Professor Bolanle Obu to read or present citation of our distinguished guest speaker, as Professor John Gyapang said, reputable, Professor Saudin Jacob Mokaje. Karibu.
Yeah, citation for Professor Saudin Jacob Makweji. Please, I would want him to be upstanding on the stage. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We are deeply honored to present today's keynote speaker at the 3rd Annual Distinguished Lecture of the African Research Universities Alliance, Arua, Professor Saudin Jacob Makweji, PhD, an accomplished legal scholar, policy advisor, intellectual property expert and authority, and an advocate whose academic and professional contributions have significantly shaped not only Tanzania's legal landscape and includes Africa as a whole in the broader IP intellectual property ecosystem. Professor Saudin Makweji is currently Associate Professor of Law at the University of Dar es Salaam School of Law, where he lectures and conducts research in the Department of Economic Law. His areas of academic and professional specialty encompasses intellectual property rights, investment law, capital markets and securities, he holds several advanced degrees, including a PhD in law from the University of Dar es Salaam and a Master's of Laws, LLM, in Intellectual Property, Commerce and Technology from the Franklin Pierce Law Center, University of New Hampshire, United States of America. This was earned through a prestigious World Intellectual Property Organization Fellowship. He also has a Bachelor of Laws and another Master of Laws from the University of Dar es Salaam. His extensive career covers public service, and more capital for health Intellectual Property Organization and the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization. He has played pivotal roles in both national and international initiatives to strengthen the IP frameworks and institutional capacities of various countries and organizations. He is currently a member of the National Steering Committee for formulating the National Intellectual Property Policy and Strategy for Tanzania. In this role, he provides guidance on aligning the national IP system with broader development goals, technological innovation, and the digital economy. Between 2006 and 2009, he served as the Intellectual Property Coordinator for the University Science, Humanities, and Engineering Partnerships in Africa program, a Pan-African initiative involving 8 universities across East and Southern Africa, hosted by the University of Cape Town. His efforts led to developing and implementing institutional intellectual property policies for various universities, which includes the University of Dar es Salaam, University of Botswana, University of Nairobi, University of Cape Town, the University of Zambia, the University of Zimbabwe, the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, and Makerere University, Uganda. Internationally, he has maintained a consistent and influential partnership with the World Intellectual Property Organization, and he served as the mission representative in 2013 when he was tasked with developing a model teaching curriculum on intellectual property law for universities in Liberia. He is a tutor and instructor in various World Intellectual Property Organization courses under the World Intellectual Property Academy. In small and medium-sized enterprises across multiple countries, including Ethiopia, Nigeria, Uganda, Botswana, and Tanzania. Through these training sessions, Professor Makweje has empowered hundreds of SME owners and entrepreneurs with the knowledge and tools to protect their innovations and leverage IP assets for business growth and sustainability. In the regional integration space, he has made significant contributions to the African Union, particularly in the African Continental Free Trade Area. His review of the draft annexes on trademarks and industrial designs under the AFTA Intellectual Property Rights Protocol. His advisory input during the Phase 2 negotiations, supported by the East African Community and the GIZ, was instrumental in aligning regional IP laws with the objective of AFTA's protocol for inclusive trade, innovation, and technology transfer. He has authored and co-authored numerous peer-reviewed publications, policy briefs, and legal commentaries. He has served as consultant to the Tanzania Commission for Universities on a lot of assignments. He is a sought-after speaker and has delivered keynote address papers at conferences hosted by the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization, the World Intellectual Property Organization, the International Trademark Association, the African Union, and recently he gave a keynote address titled African Regional Integration Efforts and Intellectual Property Law, Opportunities in Recent Developments, of the Masters in Intellectual Property program at Africa University, Zimbabwe, held just a few weeks ago on the 18th of August, 2025. He has given keynote addresses in Nigeria, in Dar es Salaam, in Cape Town, and in programs by the World Intellectual Property Organization in Geneva. In recognition of his positions, including chairman of the board of directors of the National Arts Council of Tanzania, where he offers strategic directives to the growing creative industry, in which intellectual property rights play a pivotal role. He is also a board member of the Tanzanian Telecoms Corporation, reflecting his broader interest in digital innovation and information governance. He is an accredited arbitrator in Tanzanian mainland and has handled high-stakes legal disputes in corporate trade and intellectual property law. Additionally, he is a member of the International Trademark Association, the Tanganyika Law Society, and the East African Law Society. Professor Makweje's international leadership has led and has not only contributed to legal reforms and governance excellence, but also uplifted Africa's global standing in matters of innovation, trade, and intellectual property management. His integrated vision, combining academic rigor, policy impact, and legal practice, exemplifies the values that Arua stands for: research excellence, knowledge equity, and transformative leadership. As we gather here today, it is fitting that we honor and celebrate a scholar, a reformer, a continental thinker whose work continues to shape the legal features of Tanzania and the African continent. Please join me as we welcome Professor Saudin Jacob Makweje, PhD, the 2025 Arua Distinguished Lecturer. Thank you.
At some point, I wanted to ask Professor Obo to stop. But it is what it is. Thank you very much for such a generous citation. Secondly, I would like to start by expressing my appreciation. That is a honor and a profound privilege to stand before this distinguished gathering. And I would like to thank Arua and the University of Dar es Salaam management also to invite me to have this opportunity to engage with the audience on this very important subject in the context of research, innovation, and also knowledge exchange. I would like to point out that despite what may seem to be an illustrious career track, I'm still a work in progress. And for obvious reasons, because intellectual property is a subject which is evolving, quite transformative. The dictates of the day, given the fact that technology keeps on changing over and over again, it necessitates also intellectual property to align, realign, and in some cases to recalibrate in order to address the changing societal needs. Allow me also to preface my lecture with two important caveats or precautions. Despite my experience in intellectual property and the engagement of intellectual property across Africa, just a little while ago I was talking to my good professor from Ibadan, Madam, that I had quite a good time in Ibadan and Ife, OAU, when we engaged with these two institutions in Nigeria in terms of intellectual property management some 10 years ago. In South Africa, we have strong presence through the Ushapia project, which was done way back in 2006 to 2009. So despite this experience, I would like to forewarn you that the options which I may present in terms of what should be done in the context of the universities in Africa and research management and intellectual property may not be an outright solution to your institution. What you're supposed to do is to realign, recalibrate, and look at the institutional specific context and how you can apply the ideas and concepts which you are going to discuss. So at the end of the day, I may not give you a solution, rather areas of further inquiry. So if I create more controversy, that is also my objective. I'll equally achieve my objective if you leave here with some sort of controversies. But at the end of the day, we are going to share what is considered to be an interesting subject. As Representative Arua pointed out, this is a subject which is intertwined with the research management and university operations. So if we take a little time, a few minutes to reflect on the theme today, when we talk about the interface of intellectual property and the research management, the two standout concepts come out, research management and intellectual property. Why are we talking about this aspect at this particular time? For obvious reasons. We are living in an interesting era or time zone where our time or epoch is invariably referred to as a knowledge-based society. You've heard about this terminology, information society, knowledge-based economy, in which ideas, innovations, and intellectual property assets serves as the new currency in shaping societal development. We may have our resources, natural resources, but we need creative idea to be able to exploit it to the advantage of our respective countries or communities. And that's why we are talking about the role of knowledge in the contemporary economies. There are two interesting literature which I normally like to engage with and read. One is by Thomas Cotter. It is entitled Patent Wars. Patent Wars. How patents impact our daily lives. You've heard about institutions or corporations fighting for patents like Samsung, Apple. Little we take interest to appreciate or dig in what exactly are they fighting for. Actually, what they fight for is not intellectual property. It's not patents. They are fighting for market control. So Thomas Cotter points out that in some cases, subconsciously, we make decisions based on intellectual property. Little we know that how this affects our decision at the individual level, institutional level, and national level. Let me illustrate one point at the individual level. When you go out and you want to buy a product, let's say it's a mobile phone handset, what is the decision-making process that you engage with before you decide to buy a particular brand? Is it spontaneous, or you make a decision at home? Normally, you associate yourself with certain brands. You trust certain brands, and you are prepared to wait to buy a product if that brand is not in the market. And why do you trust certain brands or products? It's because of its functionality. We call it the technical features, the functional aspect, or the anticipation of satisfaction that we'll get from a particular brand or a product. And when you talk about functionality and technical features, so this is the reason when you talk about in Uber, right? In Uber, right? Or you have shopped through Alibaba. This is a market platform. Uber is a network of transportation. But later you realize Uber, which is listed in some of the credible stock exchange, is just an idea, a platform, which is now joining these tax owners to believe into the system, and me and you, we trust on the system because of the credibility of that idea, of that creative idea that it communicates to each one of us. So what's the point? Now, with a creative idea, one can generate wealth. One can generate financial returns out of it. And it's not a surprise, maybe, the owner of Uber system or software, you may not be surprised that he doesn't own even a single taxi. Where he's having this network of millions of tax service providers working for him because of a creative idea. And this is the point which is brought forward by John Hawkins, that we are living in a creative economy. And we can give dozens of examples on and on, which indicate that with a creative idea, one will be able to make money or transform the fortunes or create wealth. But when you look at Africa, and in the context of universities, it's important also we reflect where the continent, particularly the African Union, AU, where is it heading in terms of the continental economy? And for this, I would like to refer to AU Agenda 2063. I would assume we know the aspirations, seven aspirations of the AU Agenda 2063. If you take time and reflect on the AU Agenda 2063, you'll come to realize all of them, explicitly or implicitly, they attract engagement with intellectual property in order to move with the flagship agenda, the Africa we want. As part of implementation of the AU Agenda 2063, AU moved on to sign an agreement which we call Continental Free Trade Area. And we academicians here, we don't like to talk about trade, but trade is affecting the future of our institutions. And we've got to find a way through which our universities may also play a decisive role in shaping the ongoing continental initiative, particularly the landscape of trade, the landscape of innovation, the landscape of research in Africa. When you read the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area instruments, starting with the agreement and the protocol, and interestingly in 2023, just 2 years ago, it adopted a protocol on intellectual property. And there is explicit mention of universities, research institutions, and collaboration in order to make Africa competitive. We've mentioned about some of the brands who are fighting for patent control. We would like also to see African trader, through innovation, through what we call university-industry linkage, also create what we call a competitive edge, and they're able to compete in the growing markets of Africa, where we have about 1.4 billion people. So this is the aspiration of the AU in terms of transforming Africa, the Africa we want, where there is a defined role of academic institutions, defined role of researchers in terms of creating new solutions, innovating new ideas that will be instrumental in terms of giving Africa a competitive edge. So in this context, where the message is quite loud and clear from Africa Union that innovation is the driving force of progress and competitiveness, it's important we take time to reflect on intellectual property engagement with research institutions, and in particular, universities. But before we do that, let's look a little bit at some statistics. And I've drawn these statistics from a very recent report from the World Intellectual Property Organization. We have the World Intellectual Property Indicators. Now, in 2023, a total number of 3.5, close to 6 million patents applications were registered worldwide. Remember, I mentioned earlier that when you talk about patents, we are talking about market control. It's not about just protecting an innovative idea. We're talking about market control. So 3.5 million patents application globally in 2023. Now, that was an increment of about 2.7% compared to year-to-year comparison. Now, what is striking to us should be the concentration of the patent landscape across the globe. 70% were filings in Asia patent offices, and leading offices, patent offices, included China. China registered a total of 1.6 million patents. I repeat, 1.6 million patents. And they had this project way back in 2010 where they had a project that by 2020 we want to achieve what we call 1 million patents a year. 1 million patents a year. And now they are hitting the target. 1.6 million patents per year. What does this translate in terms of the knowledge control, ownership, and the global domination? The second one in the global ranking was US. When you check on US, the filings were almost 1/3 of China filings. No wonder you see US is worried about China. Because we're talking about control of technical information, which translate now into the market. And I'm drawing these statistics. In the context of Africa, they can be a bit depressing because we don't have what we call a proper presence when it comes to the knowledge control and innovation. Now, if you translate this into the economics, well, US is still leading because the GDP of US is a 30 trillion US dollar, the GDP of US. Next to US is China, 18 trillion GDP. How about Africa? Combined, Africa is 3 trillion GDP. That's combined GDP of the entire African continent. Recently, I had the discussion about debating about the size of Africa, the geographical size of Africa. But we've got other issues also to contend with, including how we generate wealth, how innovation plays a role in terms of generating value and wealth out of the abundance of resources that Africa is currently having. So when you look at Africa now, research contribution, R&D, according to reports, it's 0.8 of GDP versus world minimum threshold of 1.9% of the GDP. So we still have some grounds to cover in terms of how we translate our research into usable products, giving competitiveness of the products which are produced in Africa. The more we invest in research, the more we engage with intellectual property, then we add value to these products. Most of the product that we buy, and we tend to be loyal to the brands, have been nurtured for years through innovation, quality control, and these are the issues which would like our universities and research also to focus on. In addition to what we see from the statistics, we also see what we call a regulatory change in Africa. I've mentioned about the adoption of the AFCFTA protocol on intellectual property, which was adopted in February 2023, which presents a major opportunity for cross-border trade and innovation. There is a distinct chapter dealing with innovation, research, and also collaboration. And this is the theme and the aspiration of Arua as well in terms of increasing research collaboration amongst universities in Africa. So as African universities, our challenge, given the statistics that we have, given the regulatory change in terms of the landscape in Africa, our challenge is both urgent and I would say also transformative. We need to quickly change and appreciate how intellectual property can leverage, can convert our research output into sustainable solutions, into sustainable into products and into resolving societal problems while ensuring our institutions are growing, are sustainable, and they remain relevant in the ever-changing market environment in Africa. So, as I mentioned before, that we'll be talking about two key concepts, intellectual property and research management. I took the liberty and discretion to assume that this lecture is not your first encounter with this subject of intellectual property. It's not the first time you hear about intellectual property. However, given the context that we are going to discuss, allow me to point out a few things about intellectual property. In the slide that you see, it just summarizes the aspects that fall within the umbrella of intellectual property. Primarily, what I've seen over the years through my engagement with academic institutions and universities, mostly we talk about patents. Mostly we talk about innovation. But there is a whole array of other subsets of intellectual property that, in one or another, are also part of what we do in our university settings, research and teaching. You can mention about industrial designs, whether you go to engineering department, you go to traditional knowledge. We have enjoyed the dance here, right? That is part of traditional cultural expressions, one of the cultural heritage. That is part of intellectual property. We have also plant varieties, new plant varieties in the field of agriculture, research in agriculture, which points out about new plant varieties which are resistant to certain types of hazardous environment or pesticides. You can also talk about copyrights. This is a big thing. We call it a sleeping giant in Africa. Now we see the artistry industry growing, and we see now more and more appreciation that the field of art can be a profession. And we have schools, colleges who are teaching, researching on arts and culture. This is part of the IP as well. So we can mention a long list of subsets that falls within the intellectual property realm. What I would like to summarize is that there is nothing which is left out from intellectual property as long as it is a result of human ingenuity, intellectual ingenuity. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking to our commandant of the National Defense Force about the dimensions of intellectual property in the context of national security. In the US, every patent which is filed in the US, the national security have got what we call the first right of refusal. Because as long as it has dimensions of national security, then the Department of Defense will have the first right to acquire that invention. So there is a link of intellectual property and national security. So we can talk about many fields. As long as there is creativity, innovation, we see intellectual property coming up and playing a role. So it's a no man's land. What you put on your glasses, the phone you're using, the clothes you're putting on, the watch you're putting on, the mic I'm using, is a result of creativity. It's a creative idea. So we are surrounded by intellectual property works, intellectual property assets. And it befits for the universities to consider how our research management will take into account intellectual property in a manner that will generate value, in a manner that will generate solutions that address some of the societal needs and problems that we are facing. How about the research management? What is it? Research management. I took some minutes to reflect on it and how it operates in most of the universities. I've been to a number of universities in Africa, and I can see the concentration of research management. How is it understood? And why maybe we are missing the intellectual property dimensions out of it. In most universities, you'll come to realize research management is technically or essentially a research fund management. They deal with the research funds. How they get the funds, how they distribute the funds, period. But what are we getting out of research undertakings? So my approach in this lecture in terms of research management, I'll be referring to the entire chain of mobilizing financial resources to fund research, guiding the research process to make sure that we get the best out of it, and also dealing with what we call commercialization or translation of research findings into usable solutions. And at that stage, my approach is to point out in all stages of research management, when you solicit funds, when the research department is looking for funders, at that early stage, when there is no research, is negotiation of funding arrangement, it's crucial that issues of intellectual property are put on the table. I'm serving as the Chief Corporate Counsel of the University of Dar es Salaam. I know sometimes how difficult this is to negotiate, because the funding terms would come and would insist that, okay, we give you money and whatever comes out of it is ours. Now you have a big problem, because you're dealing with researchers now who wants money in the form of per diem honorarium, and you lawyer come and say, wait a minute, we need to negotiate the terms of ownership of intellectual property. In some cases, researchers will not understand the broader interests at the institutional or individual level. But my point is, research management, which takes into account the entire trail of how you look for funds, how you administer funds, and how you monitor research progression, at all those stages, it's important that issues of intellectual property are taken on board. Because if we miss at the beginning, it will be very, very difficult to renegotiate at a point where the outcomes are already there. There is an invention, there is a solution, now we see the business opportunities. It becomes very difficult. So it's important from the very beginning for research managers to appreciate that it's crucial to negotiate the IP framework in the collaboration very early when they engage with the negotiation. How about during the progression of research? What is the practice in our universities? What I've seen in most of our university setting is once you have a research project going on, there is a requirement of reporting progress. Reporting progress. It's not a bad idea because you want to see whether that money is actually used. But in the process, there is no any regulation of amount of disclosure that you ask the researcher to do, the principal investigator or other investigators. So what has come out to be in most cases is we disclose every stage, everything, and later when the research project has been completed, then you go and you want to apply for a patent. You know, the National IP Office will tell you, oh, this is already in the public domain, because you are the one who disclosed it, because there is a threshold of timeline for you, once you disclose, to apply for a patent. So my point here is we need to relook in terms of how we manage tracking research project without compromising the potential or possibility of applying for a patent down the line during the research process. Later, then you have the research product. We assume now we have the workable solution, the market is there. How do you negotiate? How do you engage with the industry? The big problem we have in research management is that we start to engage with potential users when in our thoughts we consider everything is all set. Not realizing that the moment we realize there is a potential for innovation, for invention, that is the exact time we need to engage with the industry. Because at that time, you can also reorient it to fit in what is exactly needed in the industry. Of course, at that level, we normally encourage you sign NDA, non-disclosure agreement, that I share this information in confidence. So we move together from what we call a raw solution or a product into a usable solution or a product in the market. So from the whole trail, looking for funds, managing the funds, getting the update in terms of the research progression, and finally, when we commercialize, it's critical and important for intellectual property to be high in the consideration. So, having said that, it's important we deep dive a little bit into the nexus between research management and the intellectual property. And my thesis here is there is a strong and inseparable link between the research management and the intellectual property. Research, in its purest form, creates knowledge. It creates knowledge. However, knowledge that is not protected, knowledge that is not translated or utilized, often remain unused. I was in Zimbabwe a week ago on 18th. We had an interesting discussion in terms of the many research which are in the shelves, libraries of the university. So the project was, can we set our resources in terms of checking what better solution we have in research which is already done, and how we can engage with proper intellectual property experts to tap value from many research findings which are currently in the shelves, whether in the research reports, in theses, dissertations, or just policy briefs. And the consensus was we need to look in terms of how we do our things so that we can take the best out of the research and output that is coming out of research. So the key questions or critical questions are, how do we ensure that our laboratories, if they're equipped, and classrooms, do not merely produce theses and dissertations, but solutions in the form of IP assets, tradable solutions that can be scaled up for industrial and societal use. How can we do that? How can intellectual property help us to do that? How can intellectual property support universities in moving from what we consider to be periphery role to the epicenter of the African innovation system as contemplated by the AU instruments, including the AU Agenda 2063? What measures, what movements we need to make? What's the mode of engagement which we need to do in the current setting? Now, within Africa, as my topic says, we've got setbacks and prospects. As we say, if you talk about setbacks and you don't propose solutions, then you become part of the setbacks. And I don't want to be part of that. I try to the best I can to provide solutions, but it's important also we appreciate what are the challenges and the setbacks that we are currently facing in Africa. And I'll point out 4 setbacks. And this is based on the fact that there is a promise within what is going on in Africa, but the pathway or the journey to achieve the promise is not free from obstacles, and how we are going to surmount these obstacles. Number 1, in the form of setbacks, is the whole issue of resource constraint. Resource constraints. How much do we reserve for research? How much do we serve for research? This is a continental issue. There is a promise at AU that at least, was it 1% of the budget for R&D? But very few countries are living to this promise. And as the saying goes, if you don't have good eggs, you can't have a good omelette. So that's the effect which happens. How much do we save for research? When you look at the research funding landscape, we find most of the universities are still heavily reliant on external funding, which they come with an agenda. And we have our agenda, the African we want. We've got our issues. We've got our problems, which we need to address them. Now, in the absence of having appropriate funding arrangement, it will be very difficult to come up with a solution that address what we call African context issues, contextual issues that face Africa. So we have got a resource constraint. Number two, structural challenges. Now, in the context of intellectual property, we've come to realize, I did a thorough research, and I've been to some universities trying to share with them the experience and formulate the approaches and the institutional strategies. You'll find that many African universities lack well-developed intellectual property management framework. So it's still coming up in a number of universities. I can compare my time in 20 years ago when we started this agenda. Now the discussion is different. We see a number of universities, they have policies, they have got institutions. At least we see there is a hope and light at the end of the tunnel in terms of how we can use our institutional infrastructures, including the IP management offices or tech transfer offices, in order to leverage research to come up with a solution that can be used in our settings. But we also see universities adopting approaches like incubation systems, adopting policies on intellectual property and innovation. So these are promising signs in terms of the infrastructural development. But we still have a lot of universities which do not have neither policy nor intellectual property management framework. Another setback is the legal and regulatory barriers. Legal and regulatory barriers. From African setting, I normally say we have what we call a fragmented intellectual property regulation system. My good friend, Professor Caroline Nube, from South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa, yeah, he's written a very interesting article on the decolonization of intellectual property for African development. One of the key points that she raises is the current continental regulation of intellectual property is letting Africa down. We have two organizations who are technically competing for the market. One for French-speaking African countries, the other for English-speaking African countries. So we are still shaping our IP based on our colonial affiliation. That is a setback because now we are talking about a single market in Africa. Arua is moving towards collaboration, coordination in terms of research, management, governance, and sharing of the resources. Now, with the presence of the two organizations, OAPI and ARIPO, we see Africa divided Africa. And we have got some big guns who are neither in ARIPO nor in OAPI, like South Africa, Egypt, Morocco. So we look at African IP landscape from a regulatory point of view, we see we have legal and regulatory challenges which complicate cross-border investment, cross-border collaboration in a way. And we're using what we call a territoriality principle of intellectual property. Intellectual property are territorial in nature. This is one of the foundation of intellectual property. So what is protected in Tanzania is not automatically protected in Kenya or Ghana or Nigeria because of the territoriality rule. We need to look at the legal and regulatory framework and remove barriers which are now hindering effective collaboration from research and universities. And the fourth one is the cultural factors. Cultural factors. Years back when we started the agenda for IP for universities, we used to call it a mindset change. We had our own way of doing things. We do research for the sake of doing research. We create knowledge for the sake of creating knowledge. And of course, the theoretical contexts differ. Some promote that knowledge is a public good. But we have also utilitarian theories who says, oh, no, knowledge is something which is commercially valuable. So a lot of knowledge that had been created for years in Africa was left without any care nor protection. What happened? These were taken by our competitors from other continents. I was in international trade fair. We have trade fair in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, call it Saba Saba. So I went there and you see academic institutions displaying all their research projects and findings. And I saw some Chinese people keenly taking photos, inquiring a lot of information. Say, you guys, you know what is happening here? A year later, you're going to buy a product from China. And they're using the very solution that they've taken it from you with minimal readjustment. So there is this what we call a cultural change. We have got to appreciate that knowledge is a resource. Knowledge is an asset. And we have responsibility in terms of using our knowledge to further the interest of our continent. So those are the setbacks. But within these setbacks, we have prospects. And I would like to point out the following prospects. The setbacks were 4. I'll point out 5 prospects. Number 1, which is rarely appreciated in research management, is the, sorry for this, what we call intellectual property flexibilities. All these framework within the intellectual property, they have what we call policy and the legal leeway designed for developing and least developed countries. That we can use this policy cushion not to comply with the high standards of IP in order to make use of the knowledge which is already available. So we call it intellectual property flexibilities. To what extent our institutions, universities, are aware of the available flexibilities, that the amount of knowledge which we can use, which is obtained anywhere in the world without any repercussions, because we fit in within the category of either developing or least developed country. So my point here is we need to use strategically the faculty of flexibility which is available in the current international intellectual property framework, particularly the WTO agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property. We call it a TRIPS agreement. It allows LDCs, and most of our countries are in the category of LDCs, to use what we call policy and the legal space to use intellectual property in a manner which best suits their respective interest and context. We are lagging behind in terms of our ability to use this. For instance, during COVID-19, we are looking for a solution for this pandemic. Little we knew that within the intellectual property, where we had this vaccination and the pricing thing, we could still use flexibility to use the available solution based on the fact that we are an LDC or developing country. Only a few countries have been able to use that in the context of HIV pandemic. Rwanda, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria, I think, during the HIV pandemic. We use the flexibility in terms of accessing recent technologies which are protected elsewhere and be able to domesticate it using the exceptions which is provided within the intellectual property international legal framework. And this also can apply when it comes to educational materials, access to information, where we facilitate access to information for those who are visually impaired persons, special category of people. So there is this what we call private vis-a-vis public interest debate within the intellectual property, and intellectual property flexibilities are a fitting option for most of the African countries, including universities, in order to make use of intellectual property. Number 2, the prospect is the fact that we now see the increased number of IP experts in our continent. Increased number of IP experts. We have 2 programs, for instance, 3 programs across Africa, which is funded by African Regional Intellectual Property Organization. One in Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah university, one in Africa University in Monterrey and the other one at the University of Dar es Salaam. And these programs are designed to train African experts to be able to understand the dimensions of intellectual property in the context of Africa and be able to engage with discussion, negotiation in a manner that supports the African agenda. So down the line, we see increased number of experts coming from the continent who appreciate the context of our environment, the context in which we do our research and apply the principle in a manner that supports development of Africa. Prospect number 3 is the fact that we have an enabling legal framework now with the adoption of the African Continental Free Trade Area Intellectual Property Protocol. I would urge universities and researchers to take time to read the protocol. There is a chapter for research and research collaboration and innovation. It's important to engage with this instrument and translate it in the context of our institutions, such that we are able to make use of it in a manner that further research and improve research management. Number 4 is the fact that while the two regional bodies, ARIPO and OAPI, are somehow problematic, but they offer a framework which allows what we call cross-country registration of intellectual property. The discussion now at the level of AU is to unify the two institutions. We hope that will work out, but there's still a lot of ground to be covered because of the structural limitation. And number 5, increased demand for African solutions. African solutions in the field of health, agriculture, energy, and also digital technology. We have recently an interesting treaty that has been adopted at international level. We call it the WIPO Treaty on Genetic Resources, Intellectual Property, and Traditional Knowledge. And this is particularly of interest to Africa because we are very rich in genetic resources. We are very rich in traditional knowledge. We have seen our dances, and we have got this what we call cultural tourism. So to what extent, as universities are engaging in our research management to put these issues on the top of the agenda so that we can take advantage of vast resources which are available in Africa. We have seen for many years what we call piracy of genetic resources from Africa. In 2010, where the Convention on Biological Diversity was adopted, partly it was because of the complaint of developing countries and least developed countries that our resources are being pirated without any returns to Africa. A good example is the wood deer plant. Anyone coming from Botswana, Namibia? There's an interesting story about the wood deer plant, where you know the Bushmen in Kalahari. So researchers from the West went there and they came to realize these people, they can stay for 3 days without eating. And they're all fine. So they reach out to them, what do you do in order to stay for 3 days without eating? They said, there is a plant, wood deer, that we eat. And once we eat, I'll be fine for 3 days, 4 days. And they said, well, in the West, there's a big problem of obesity. Can we use this plant to resolve this problem? So they gathered information from these Bushmen in Kalahari. Then they developed special drugs to fight obesity. And it worked out in the West. So the question was, then how much is going back to the Bushmen? Then they came to realize it's none. So the public outcry came out. We need to engage with this Pfizer thing, the big guns, the pharmaceutical companies. Then later they had to agree that, okay, a certain portion of revenue will be dedicated for development of these traditional communities. And this is one of the examples out of many where genetic resources in Africa are being pirated. We need to stand up as universities, introduce causes and appreciate how this can be protected in a manner that serves the best interest of our countries. Now, the WIPO Treaty, which was adopted last year, interestingly, the discussion started some 20 years ago. Why did it take 20 years to conclude a deal? Conflict of interest. Pharmaceutical companies and the research center in the West knew that if the obligation is created to repay traditional communities who have been preserving these genetic resources for years, that will be a daunting financial obligation for them. So they had to negotiate some safeguards, exceptions. Finally, at least we have the instrument in place. And there is a requirement now in any patent which is filed anywhere, if they've used genetic resources from developing or least developed countries or wherever, or traditional knowledge, they've got the statutory obligation to acknowledge the source. And the moment you acknowledge the source, then you open up a platform to negotiate in terms of how much are you going to pay the traditional community where you retrieve a particular GR, genetic resources or traditional knowledge. So we still have opportunities. The question is, to what extent our research management take advantage or are aware of these continental and the global dynamics and how these are informing our research agenda. So it's important for the university to reposition in the context of the knowledge-based economy or knowledge-based society that we are talking about. In contemporary times, universities are required to serve as engines of innovation, driving solutions to the problems that our dear continent, Africa, is facing. So how the university will reposition in order to make sure that the research management take into account intellectual property in a manner that creates what we call competitiveness and sustainability of our institutions. I've got a proposal, 4 proposals. Number 1, universities must create. And for this, my dear professors, particularly DVCs who are dealing with the research, we have got a problem of recycling solutions. Recycling solutions. A lot of proposals are coming. But you may come to realize the projected findings have already been discovered, presented elsewhere. Because in our assessment, we just confine to the paper that is presented to us as part of the research management. So what is my point here when we talk about creating? Many universities now are encouraging what we call knowledge progression, not knowledge creation. Progression. Development is about progression. I normally like to use this example or illustration of a dwarf and a giant. Am I a dwarf? Maybe, it depends on the context. But if a dwarf stands beside of a giant, who is in a position to see far away? Obvious, the giant, right? But if you take a dwarf and place him or her on the shoulders of the giant, who will be better off? So the patent system and intellectual property system operate like this. I've mentioned at the beginning the statistics about 3.4 million patents that have been applied for 2023. This is the technical information. And we consider this, currently there are more than 100 million patents globally. So this is the a pool of information that if you take a researcher in a specific field and place him or her within this vast information of patents, he'll be able or she'll be able to come up with a better solution because he'll know what is already known. We say we should not reinvent the wheel. You have got to come up with the solutions. I can tell you most of the patents which have been registered in some of the universities in Africa, if you subject them into what we call substantive examination, they fail the test. Because you'll come to realize that this is already covered either maybe in Kenya, this is already covered in Brazil, because the network in terms of patent search is global. So the point which we are drawing here in terms of creation is important for research managers, research management framework, to consider using what we call patent database. Before you approve a research proposal for a technical or scientific research, ask the researcher to submit also a patent search in that specific field. What has been done already? We need to save our resources, right? To make sure that we spend our resources to research areas which is not yet covered. So a number of universities are using patent database or patent search report as a prerequisite before approving a research proposal. So that's number one. Number two, once the research has been done, it's important we protect. Secure rights through effective IP management systems. From idea to conception to product development. What are the IP issues that are taken into account in the whole process of research management? Number three is to commercialize, as I've already said, and number four, to incentivize. Because our institutions will not attract best researchers if there is no incentive package system that supports researchers. Now, having said that, and I know my time is already off, I would like to propose a pathway moving forward. What should be done as part of our agenda, and maybe Arua take it up, appreciating the fact that intellectual property is central to research management. In the African context, we've seen that AU is moving towards developing an IP landscape where research and innovation is also central to it. What should it be done in order to make sure that our universities contribute meaningful to the national development and also continental development? Let me put before you a proposed pathway towards strategically alignment of our institutions. Of course, I'll repeat my caution that I said at the outset, that there's no one size fits all. All right? You've got to use the institutional context specific, appreciating the regulatory environment in your country, policy environment in your country, such that we'll be able to apply some of this. But at least we have some common ground in terms of the strategies that may apply across all institutions, irrespective of our differences. So number one, we need to demystify intellectual property. Universities have been operating as ivory towers, not knowing this is separating us from a very important constituencies, community-based organization, SMEs, startups. It's good that we see universities now are setting up incubation systems. Universities are going out now to engage with people. But within the intellectual property conception, we need to demystify and make it simple. Make it user-friendly. Because a lot of people have come to realize when you talk about intellectual property, the first thing that strikes them, they consider about complicated things. We're talking about maybe nuclear technology, space science. Nope. As I've said, intellectual property can be made simple, user-friendly, and applied at a very elementary level. And how do we do that? To make intellectual property simple is to look at the levels of engagement. It's true, in some cases, intellectual property can become very complicated. But we don't have to make it complicated in all cases. Some years back, I had a client who came to me who wanted to register a patent on yebo yebo. Do you know yebo yebo? Slippers. Slippers. I said, what's the invention here? He said, no, this makes the person who wear it comfortable in terms of walking, and there is a special specs that I presented. And I came to realize this is already registered in some credible intellectual property office like the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO. Some have registered patents on brassiere. We're talking about simple patents. And that's why within the patent law, below patents, most countries, they have what we call utility model or utility certificates. It's a lesser patent option. So we need to make it simple and instead of putting it as a very complicated phenomenon. As part of demystifying intellectual property, we have to take it beyond the legal precincts. Many people consider intellectual property as a legal subject. True, there's a lot of legal-related issues. But in its operation, intellectual property cut across all the fields. And that's why the Masters of Intellectual Property programs at Kwame Nkrumah, University of Dar es Salaam, and Africa University admit students from different backgrounds. And we've seen it working. Because a person with a medical background will need to know intellectual property in the pharmaceutical context. A person who is dealing with agriculture research will need to know new plant varieties. An artist needs to know the copyright dimension that comes with the intellectual property package. And the list can go on and on. We need to demystify intellectual property in order to make it usable by SMEs, startups, and farmers in the African context. Number two, we need to do what we call institutional IP audits, intellectual property audits. Have you done in your university the intellectual property audit? What is it to start with? The IP audit. One, we say IP audits is a process where the institution takes stock of intellectual property and get to know what exactly they own. What are the potentials? What are the setbacks? And what is the system that will make the institution be able to use intellectual property in a manner that benefits the institution? We go by the saying that if you can't protect it, if you can't measure it, you can't protect. You've got to know the size in order to know how you protect. And if you cannot measure, you can't plan. So plans must be based on the empirical data, empirical information, and these can only be obtained if a proper institutional intellectual property audit is done in order to realize the potential existing within the institution, the setbacks and areas which can be improved within the institution. Number three, it's important to set up an institutional framework. Establish what we call a responsive intellectual property policies. Responsive, and I use this term deliberately. Responsive. Responsive is institutional specific intellectual property policy that align with the context of research processes which are ongoing within a particular university, that align with the national, what we call research policy within your respective countries. We call it responsive IP policy. Number four is to do the capacity building. This should be an ongoing agenda. And we cut across. It's good that the University of Dar es Salaam, we are now teaching intellectual property beyond the School of Law. Business school, they do teach IP as entrepreneurial assets. Humanities, they teach IP in the context of copyrights, at least to appreciate. Engineering also, there are aspects of patents. We need to make it a cross-cutting subject by capacity building, train researchers, administrators, and students on IPR and the whole process of management. Number five, policy advocacy. Align university policies with the national and the regional frameworks, especially the big debate now in Africa, the CFTA, Continental Free Trade Area. Sometimes I say the name is a bit misleading because it talks about trade, and universities sometimes feel we are not part of that. But actually, we are central to that, because for African products to be traded, they need to have specs, technical functions, and where are they going to get it? From researchers, from our institutions. So we need to realign our plans and our strategies to make sure that our policies and approaches respond, aligned to the ongoing continental initiatives. Number six, importance of collaboration. And on this, I would like to commend Arua, the initiative that is ongoing in terms of collaboration. We can share resources. I've been to Ibadan, I've been to Obafemi, Ololo, had a very good time in Liberia, Botswana, South Africa. When you see how collaboration can have impact, you only come to realize it's important we have institutionalized collaboration in terms of sharing resources, experiences, in terms of the pushing the intellectual property agenda forward in the context of research management. And also, as I've said before, we need also to do a bit of cultural change. Promote a culture where research excellence is measured not only by publications, but also by societal impact. I think that's important. Then we'll see those who come up with copyrightable work that make meaningful contribution. Patents. What we've seen recently, most of universities put patents, but they leave out other aspects of intellectual property. It's crucial that we embrace intellectual property in its holistic manner. In that way, researchers will understand that being creative and creating workable solution, usable solution, will also reward them in terms of promotion. Now, as I conclude, I would like to highlight that Africa and African universities are standing at a historical juncture. We've got a choice to make. We've got a choice to make. Either to remain mere spectators or consumers of global knowledge systems, or we raise up to become creators. We raise up to become protectors and exporters of knowledge-based assets. The choice is within our means. We have got to decide as institutions how we propel the agenda of intellectual property in a manner that serves the best interests of our institutions, particularly protecting research-based knowledge, knowledge-based assets that are coming out of our university. Intellectual property is not a luxury. It's not a luxury. It's a must. It's part and parcel. It's integral to the success of our institutions. We have seen the recent ranking of universities. Issues of intellectual property are also occupying a significant portion. And it's not that we are not creative. It's that the systems that have been there for decades are not enabling, are not appreciating the dynamics of intellectual property in a manner that will further knowledge. So let us reimagine our universities, not as ivory towers, as I said before. Let's calm down, deal with people, engage with ordinary people, look at their problems, find out solutions that address the real problems that are facing the African people. And that way we'll be able to come up with a solution which is attractive to the people that we are meant to serve. So we should not be separated from the society that we are living in terms of thinking and coming up with solutions. Rather, we should be innovation factories where ideas and solutions are generated, protected, and more important, they're transformed into solutions that tackle our own African problems, like what? Poverty, eradication or alleviation, diseases, climate change, unemployment, access to water, and many, power, energy. We have in 2007, the WIPO development agenda was adopted in 2007, the World Intellectual Property Development Agenda. Now it's about 20 years down the line. What was the idea behind the WIPO DA? It was simple. Make intellectual property serve broader developmental goals. So we should make our research serve broader developmental goals by making them user-friendly, usable, translate them from the shelves into solutions that people can use. So distinguished guests, and scholars, and friends who have come here today, as we conclude this lecture, let me, and all of us, let's take time to pause and remember some of the interesting inspirational words that we get from our African thinkers, some of the Africa's greatest thinkers who continue to inspire the continent. One of them is Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. The campus here is named by his name, Julius Kambarage Nyerere. Once he said this: knowledge is power. If it is not applied to the solution of our problems, then it is not power, it is useless. Knowledge is power. That's the first section of it. Then if it is not applied to the solution of our problems, then it is useless. So today we have reaffirmed that knowledge must be never a dominant subject. We have to give it life. It can be used. And intellectual property is part and parcel of transforming a mere knowledge into a usable product. So it must be the heartbeat of our continent's progress, the knowledge, as we are living in the knowledge-based society. Nelson Mandela, the father of freedom, taught us that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Indeed, in every lecture we do in our universities, the research we do, and every innovation fostered within our institutions, we are sharpening that weapon, which Mandela said education can be a weapon to change, to drive changes. And finally, the great Chinua Achebe, who warned us some years back that until the lions have their own historians, we know that, right? The history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. How does this relate to IP and our discourse today? Is that through strategic institutional research management integrated with the use of intellectual property, Africa is now developing its own historians. As you do research, you protect and you make use of it, you become a historian in your own respect. You become an inventor in your own respect and guardian of knowledge, ensuring that our stories, whether in the form of traditional knowledge and folklore expressions, which is the subject of intellectual property, or the struggles we get in terms of using IP flexibilities, and the triumphs that we won, they are told by us, they are meant for us, the research we do is meant for us and for the world at large. So let this distinguished lecture remind us that knowledge is not just a privilege, rather it is a responsibility. A responsibility, not just a possession, but a promise. A promise that Africa's future will be crafted by her own thinkers, shaped by her innovators, and secured by her people. And we need to secure the knowledge that is generated in Africa. May we leave this hall with courage, unity, and with unshakable faith that Africa's best chapters are yet to be written. And we, you and I, they are authors of that next chapter of Africa. I invite all of us to embrace the responsibility of taking intellectual property as part of our research and research management with responsibility, courage, imagination, and conviction. Thank you very much for your attention. Asante sana.
Let's make the second round of applause. And him being the third, let's make the third round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, we can all agree that it is very insightful and reflective when he was exploring the intersection of intellectual property rights and research management. am I a dwarf? That depends, right? As he said. But what I really catch was, if you don't have a good egg, you can't have a good omelet. Do we produce solutions? But he gave the pathway. I think we all catch that one. Well, I'd love to take you back and to thank Professor Bola from the University of Lagos for the citation. Thank you very much. And now on the discussion, let's join me to welcome Dr. Nomakwezi Mzilikazi, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation from Rhodes University, South Africa. Karibu.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Vice Chancellor, colleagues, distinguished guests. I think you will agree with me when I say the choice of our keynote speaker today has turned out to be a very inspired one. Thank you very much, Prof, for that really, really thought-provoking lecture. I'm requesting that we get a microphone for you. Excellent. So what stands out for me from this lecture is just how IP is not only a technical or legal matter, but one that deeply affects the ways in which we live, the ways in which we learn, the ways in which we manage research, and the ways in which we innovate. And so I am more than convinced that there are more people in this auditorium and online who have had their minds activated and are raring to go with their questions. So we're going to open up an opportunity for the audience to ask its questions. I'm going to need guidance in terms of how we're going to manage the online questions as well. But we'll start here in the room. Yes, sir. Earlier on, Prof spoke about agility and reflexiveness and responsiveness, so I'm going to need my audiovisual assistance to keep an eye out for when the hands appear, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mwakaji. Please allow me to start by applauding you for the intriguing lecture. And of course, sometimes, okay, I'm reminding my name. My name is Antidias Kaitu. I'm the lecturer from the School of Law, and I'm a student. That's why I find this a privilege to ask you this question. So I was saying I should start by applauding you and thanking you for the intriguing lecture, but also sometimes disturbing one. And more specifically on your second slide, and on your first slide, on your introduction rather, you mentioned about the underlying issue on IP and patents, which is controlling markets, market control. Will I be right if I say also that market control extends to businesses, or by further extension, to money or profit? Then my question now, you cited some statistics on the GDP comparing China, US, and the combination of Africa combined. To me, that was very disturbing. Disturbing in what sense? Measuring the statistics against the population on the continent, it may be sad to conclude that Africa as a continent, we are largely mere markets. And should I say, sorry for this word, useless consumers of these global markets. Considering the number of the population, we are contributing less on the global market. Now, speaking business terms, how can we use IP to leverage the economics and make Africa become a key player in the global economy? Now, related to that, and going specifically to the management, to the research management in the universities, now in this case, allow me to contextualize how research is done in most of the African universities, this one in particular, where you find much of this research is not funded by the government and by the university. And you mentioned of African universities managing research which contribute meaningfully to the national and the continental development. And now, in our case...
Thank you, sir. There's quite a lot in that
in one second.
Okay,
in our
so
case...
there's only going to be one moderator, please wrap up.
Yeah, in 1 second, I'm finishing. How do we manage to come up with research that have national and continental development in circumstances where these researches are funded by the competitor who is not interested in the national or continental development, but the profits? Thank you.
All right. So, my colleagues, I'm going to ask that you allow me and you afford me the opportunity to manage the session. Prof, that was quite packed. There's quite a few questions in there. So what we would suggest is that you digest some of it, and then we're going to take one or two more questions, and then we can handle them as a batch. I'm going to appeal to my colleagues that we make our input succinct, please. So let's take a second question. All right, Prof, you can go ahead then and handle that comprehensive input.
Thank you very much. I must acknowledge that the questions are quite relevant, Dr. Kaitu. It's true that intellectual property is a multifaceted subject. We may talk about it from a research context as a tool that may enable research institutions or universities in terms of leveraging or taking full advantage of the research output that is coming out of their various research undertakings. That is one side of looking at it. But repeatedly and consistently, I've been talking about the final phase of a research project. Why do we do research to start with? We want to create solutions. And these fits into that final phase where we talk about commercialization. And in some cases, the term commercialization sounds like a misleading one, because then it brings all the commercial dimensions. And we understand some of our universities are publicly funded, and they would like to avoid the connotation of commercialization. Then they prefer what we call knowledge transfer. But what do you transfer, and at what time do you transfer? It's a transactional arrangement. There is a quid pro quo. You transfer knowledge, then you get something in return, whether in money or in kind. So there is also what we call profit dimensions out of it. I can give you an example of the role of intellectual property in profit maximization in a typical commercial setting. Consumers, and you and I, we are somehow so enslaved with what we call new experience. And we've got this consumer experience. Why do you buy a phone which is the latest edition and you have a previous edition which works very well, but you just want to have what we call this a consumer experience? And what makes a consumer experience a new experience is the technology that is applied to a product. You remember some years back we did not have touch screen gadgets. Then when that came up, we saw, okay, this is an interesting one. But now we have what we call AI-enabled cameras, whatever. And consumers want to have that new experience. So because of technology, a company or an institution is able, number one, to retain the consumers that it had before, and number two, to attract new consumers. And how many times, just reflect on your experience, you have turned out to be a promoter of a product or a brand by advising your friends to go and buy. And that company is not paying you. But because of the good experience you had in using a particular product, you are now turning out to be a promoter by advising others to go and buy that product. And in that way, you are creating a market for the company because of the technological solution, or we call it innovative solution, that they brought to you. You like it, you enjoyed it, and they lived up to the promise. And you are able now to enjoy the product, but also you are now turning out to be a promoter or an agent who is not paid in a way. So that is one of the ways through intellectual property normally works within the, what we call profit marginalization and profit extension within the company, because it enables the company or product of the company to sell more because of the new features, which gives new experience to consumers. So that goes to money, of course. We are talking about control of the market, but ultimately it's the money that the company or an institution is getting. We have a number of examples. I had no time to mention examples of institutions, research institutions, who have been able to license key technologies that have been developed within their research settings, and they're getting millions of dollars as part of the royalties from commercial entities. Because we must admit that in most cases, universities do not have the necessary equipment to do the commercial thing. We do not have sometimes the passion or the expertise. So we have to engage a third party, a licensee, who will be able to make commercial progression within the market. So in that way, we are talking about money coming back to the university through the intellectual property. Now, you mentioned about the fact that Africa is just a market. It's a sad reality. And that's why we want to transform our history. And I mentioned about we are the ones who can make a new chapter in terms of the role of Africa in terms of innovation and productivity. There is a close nexus between the figures that I pointed out. And if you take time to look at the history of China, what they did, to many people, they look at China as a country which is so notorious for piracy, intellectual property infringement. But little we know that the harshest penalties for intellectual property infringement are found in China now. That's why I use the term, we use intellectual property flexibilities. We have got the policy and legal cushion where we can use as developing or least developed countries to make use of the IP system now without having international repercussion, because of the freedom or the options that have been given, in a manner that strengthen our production lines, strengthen our research institutions, and in that way we'll be able to use innovations which have been developed elsewhere. We improve, we say AAC. You either adapt, adopt, or in some cases you create a whole new thing. And in that way, you'll be able now to increase value in a product that is sold. Now, look at the chain of beneficiary in a typical intellectual property setting. Let's talk an example, not on innovation, technical. We talk about in the field of arts, the industry. I said this is a sleeping giant. Now, if we promote, let's say it's a musical work, it's a movie, how many participants will be taken on board to make a single musical work? A lot. There are those who are dealing with attire, costumes. There are those who are setting up the scene, those who are doing the shooting, all the variables. So the multiplier effect of having a proper intellectual property protection is job creation, income generation, ultimately to translate to the national development. 2014, the statistics from creative industry in the US, the report said their revenue from creative industry equals US defense budget. US defense budget. So that is multi-trillion. Say this is a multi-trillion giant. Why those revenues are there? Is it because they are so creative or not? You come to realize having the proper systems of protection and defined lines of commercialization. Finally, funding. I mentioned we need also to look at how our research funding is done, because if external funding is coming with an agenda, then it will be very difficult to address the African specific problems that need the attention of the universities. Back to you.
Thank you, Prof. I can see it is a comprehensive response to a comprehensive input. There is a question right here at the front, and I want to acknowledge the questions that have come through on the Zoom platform. We will take this question and then an answer, and then go to the two at the back. If you will allow me, I will join Prof. Where he's sitting.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you for that very interesting presentation. Professor Luyemisi Bangoshe, SAN, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, Innovation, and Strategic Partnerships, University of Ibadan in Nigeria. Once again, thank you. Now, Prof, I'm a lawyer by profession. Okay. The question is, looking at what students are doing, a lot of students are coming up with a lot of innovations right from school. Now, in a curriculum, well, in Nigeria, we've introduced entrepreneurship right from year one, because not everybody can get a white-collar job. So we are trying to make them to know that right from school in the university, entrepreneurship will make you to go out and you don't have to look for jobs. Now, with all these innovations that are coming up through our students, what is your thought? If we bring IP as one of the general studies in 100 level, 200 level, just like we've done for entrepreneurship, so that the students catch them young, right from when they're in their 100 level. Let them bring a course, compulsory course, not elective, into their year one or year two on IP, so that all these their innovations, they will know that they should not sell, you know, because they are young. Sometimes when you have these ideas, just like you said, they just want to share it. And meanwhile, those adults take it and run with it. So my thought, and what is your thought? Should we bring this into the curriculum right at inception? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Oluye Miss. I've got it right? You're right on point. Yeah, I would say in law, in legal practice, I just adopt what you're suggesting. Just to cement on it, somehow I would like to mention about China, because some 20 years ago when I was studying IP, I had a lot of Chinese students in the US, one of the top tier IP law school in the US. And I asked them, who is paying for you? Because the fee was very high. I had a scholarship. They say, no, it's fully funded by the government, and we've got a contract to go back to China. We've come here to learn what US is doing, and someone in the UK, Germany, and we're going to go back to compete with them. Now, one of the stories they told me is that now intellectual property is being taught from elementary school in China. And WIPO have developed a curricula for students at elementary level. we call it start them young. Now, I mentioned about demystifying intellectual property, make it simple, avoiding these legal jargons. They make it complicated. Make it fit, sweet, and address the level of knowledge that you're talking about. So I fully agree with you that it's important to think of that. In Tanzania also we have introduced the same model where entrepreneurship is being taught now from primary school. Of course, there's a lot of investments which need to go into in order to make it work, but this should be one of the subjects, like within maybe a general subject. Students should understand from the very beginning. Some they taught even from a family level that you can appreciate your creativity, respect other people's creativity so that they can respect you. So I fully agree with you, and some countries have done that, and we see now 1.6 million patents in China. They're not coming from big companies, mostly from startups. And they know that this is a game changer. We control knowledge, we control the market. And that's how the global economy is going. We need to wake up in the context of Africa.
Thank you. Let's take 2 questions from the back, please, coming out of the Zoom platform.
Okay, we have 2 questions. Question number 1 from Professor Jean Uwimana, Stellenbosch University. IPR or IP can only be valuable when research is conducted with integrity. How do we see intersectionality and the reinforcement of the intersectionality at the institutional level and within the premises of AFCTA? And then question number 2, thank you, Prof. Could you explain how ACFTA protocols always have the provisions that align with the domestic legislation, both with regards to IP and digital assets? How will such article embrace the ambition of a single Africa that trades with herself? Given the territorial posture of IP, how do we see Africa benefiting these 2 protocols, especially the startups and the commercialization thereof? Thank you.
Thank you. It's an interesting question, IP and the integrity and bring the dimensions of CFTA. I've repeatedly mentioned about CFTA. It's a continental initiative within the EU. Now, I can respond regarding the IPR and the integrity is crucial that researchers follow and abide by the ethical rules or ethical dimensions. And this essentially relates to a scenario where maybe a researcher is accessing a previously worked findings, the duty to acknowledge, the duty to attribution obligation. So if the research management is devoid of integrity, what will happen, we may have research findings and research reports, and what we consider to be as innovation or a new solution, only to come to realize it's not new, it has been done by others, and the whole thing collapsed. So there is what we call inseparable fusion between intellectual property and integrity. In fact, some of the National IP Office, they put a requirement, what we call a duty of candor. That is, you deal with the filing or innovation, then you have to operate in good faith. So it's important that is a part and parcel of the research management to make sure that whatever comes out of the university also is recognizes own work, original work, is not a pirate or infringement of pre-existing IP rights. Now, additional to that, in the context of CFTA, he has raised a very interesting point, that within the CFTA protocol, there is a mention of need to appreciate national special context, national what we call diversity. And that is a strategic negotiation approach, because Africa is quite diverse. When we go to other continents, normally they ask a very strange question, how is Africa? Thinking that I know what is happening in Nigeria, in East Africa. Well, Africa is heterogeneous in the sense that we have different system, cultural settings. And this is the reason why CFTA have put a provision regarding appreciating the domestic context as we apply intellectual property. How will this frustrate the future continental alignment? I may not have an answer at the moment, but we are pushing forward in terms of approximation as opposed to harmonization. And this is the strategy in a negotiation where you give some leeway for some countries to appreciate their own context without forcing them to follow the context which is proposed in a particular framework. So that was a negotiating context of IFCFTA. It was necessary for the instrument to appreciate and respect the territorial context. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to negotiate and agree on a deal.
Thank you very much, Prof. We have opportunity to take more questions from the room. We continue to acknowledge those that are on the Zoom platform. We'll come back to you shortly. The two gentlemen at the front and the SG. So let's take three.
I thank you so much, Madam Moderator, and Professor Mwakaje. Thank you for a very exciting lecture. I am Major General Wilbert Ibuge, the Commandant of the National Defense College, Tanzania. On a lighter note, you spoke about being asked how Africa is doing. Because Africa, to many outside Africa, it's still deemed as a single country. I also had a question that somebody asked because they heard me speaking in a language they didn't understand. I said, how do you find it here? And because the person who was asking looked like me, I said, and you, how do you find it here? And then I received a very rude remark, I won't say it here. So that's the perception of Africa, and to those who are outside there, and to some of us at times who meet others and think we think the same. But thank you for this very interesting and, in my view, groundbreaking lecture in terms of the transformation of our view about intellectual property rights. My concern is on one element. When it comes to academia, our focus is research has to begin from the essence of leveraging, standing on the shoulders of giants. You must be able to say, come on, there is no inventing the wheel today. Somebody must have done something. So what is your contribution? What is the gap? Yes, sometimes the gap is actually not even a gap, it's a void. And this is the essence, in my view, when it comes to this lecture. That void, which you so rightly, in my view, in details, pointed out, speaks volumes about the quantum of what filings we do as the continent to showcase creativity and innovation. And because this is being done at my alma mater institution, the University of Dar es Salaam, I studied political science here and taught a bit before I returned to the military. I am especially one who would want to hear you out in terms of does this mindset creation of how we do research and produce knowledge really going to, and my good friend, the Vice Chancellor is here, really going to impact into harnessing what we have not harnessed for so long. That adage of researches are only found accumulating dust on our shelves. To actually doing away with that adage, that proven style of doing research, you must have somebody has done it. What is the gap to addressing the void? Are we there in your view? Because I'm speaking to not just an academic, but one who is practicing the imparting of knowledge on the IPR. Are we there? Because we should run while the others are walking. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Major General SG.
Thank you so much for a very interesting lecture. Clearly, as you indicated, the research management environment within our universities has primarily focused on grants management and reporting our scientific output, with very little focus on IP management and its full chain. I guess it's primarily because many of our research officers do not have the requisite skills in IP management. I remember some 14 years ago when I was Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Development at University of Ghana. We did some work with the Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research. And when we wanted to file a patent, it was just impossible. So we allowed our collaborators from Japan to file on our behalf. So you will find it in the records of University of Ghana or Africa. It will be found in the records in Japan. What can ARIPO and WIPO and the allied institutions do to support our IP officers in our universities? Thank you.
All right, there was a third question here. Covered? Okay, so you can take those.
Oh, thank you. Major, thank you very much. Major General, it's an interesting question in the sense that how should we then do our research? Should we continue with the business as usual, which is quite exposing in terms of how the knowledge is shared? I raised one point in my roadmap, the pathway we should follow, when I mentioned about creating and the use of what we call a patent database. Now, that depends on the type of research you're talking about, because when you mention about patents, we're talking about technical solutions. But we've got a wide array of research in the humanities, which is not necessarily scientific nor technological, but we always ask about where the research gap. And the only mechanism we have to assess that is through literature review. Do a bit of review, then tell us where are the gaps, what other people have done. That's fine. Maybe in humanities that may still feel is sufficient. Do you have any other options? But for scientific related research, my argument is we should add another layer by asking the, at the level of proposal, to support it with a patent search report in a specific field of research. Can you tell us how many patents we have in that field? We tested here at the University of Dar es Salaam one of the theses, which sounded to be a breakthrough solution. But when we subjected it in the patent database, we came across dozens of patents already covered
the same field. But already in the thesis, it indicated that this is the new knowledge that has been created. Maybe new knowledge where in Tanzania or across the globe, but we know patent assessment yardstick cut across beyond territorial borders. Any knowledge where is available anywhere. That's why we pointed out about we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Can we ask a proposal to be supported by, if it's a scientific proposal, with a patent search? A simple search. Then comes the capacity. Do we have the capacity to carry out patent search? How do we do that? We need our IP office to be able to help on how do we do a patent search, because we have free patent database and we have paid for patent database. Some may not have resources to access paid for patent database, which may have some very latest and very breakthrough technologies. So I think the void you mentioned can be covered when we introduce another layer in terms of, if it is scientific, technological-based research, please support it with a patent search report. It will be helpful to a researcher, because the researcher may have a very erroneous thinking that I'm coming up with a new solution, which is already there. From another context, is we may say abuse of resources. If we fund a research whose solutions and findings are already found elsewhere, we need a new breakthrough. And I think if we do that, we realign a little bit of research management to introduce a requirement of patent search report for scientific and technological research. Then I think we'll be able to fill the void and not to continue as a business as usual, where in most cases, as I said, we are recycling the findings because we don't have proper parameters to assess what is already known on the ground. Prof. Gyapong, thank you very much. It's a very correct and right observation. We had also a scenario like that. I remember at some point here, the collaborator said, okay, we now have the findings which we feel we can proceed with the patent. This is the budget in order to file a patent application. Yeah. And the institution say we have not budgeted for that because, as Dr. Kaitu said, we are externally dependent in terms of research findings. So even protection, which will benefit our institution, we want it also to be externally sourced out. I think it's something which we need to surmount from this psychological barrier, psychological setback, where we consider that something which is valuable, we still have someone to do for us. So capacity building is crucial. Now, ARIPO, you've mentioned about ARIPO and OAPI, they have programs. I think the big problem we have is information flow. ARIPO is operating on, supporting a lot of universities in terms of IP awareness, but we have a program on what we call patent drafting course. Patent drafting course. And for members of the universities who are interested, it's free, fully funded, not free. Someone is paying for it. But at least there is a scholarship. WIPO and ARIPO have joined forces. Normally it's a 2-week program in Zimbabwe, within the ARIPO headquarters, where you have access to laboratories, patent examiners, and they take you through the whole process on how you draft a patent, what you should envisage or contemplate potential lines where others may wish to exploit. It's an interesting course. I did attend, and I must admit, I'm from a legal background. That was one of the most tough courses that I took because it's all scientific exchanges in terms of the information which is purely scientific. Then you have to translate it into legal documents, a patent application document, by something which is supported by WIPO, ARIPO, and OAPI as well. So if something which maybe Arua may wish to think, reach out to ARIPO and OAPI, communicate that information to members of Arua, and in that way we may have also members from Arua also taking this course. And this is another economic opportunities to be a patent drafter or patent examiner.
Thank you. We will take 2 more questions from the platform on Zoom, and then we will move towards concluding this program.
Okay, the question comes from Diana Antwi Thank you very much, Professor Mwakaje, for insightful lecture. You suggested application for research funds should include reports of novel researches. There is possibility that the time of making application, the proposed research project will have the prospect discovering something new that could be protected. However, the patent database are updated regularly, leading to the possibility that the finding from the research may not be new by the time the research is conducted. How can the University Research and Innovation Manager manage this situation? Question number 2, it's from Itemelang Mabusane. Following your excellent presentation, I would like to come specifically to the issue of TRIPS agreement and its flexibilities. I found myself wondering about the practical application of these provisions. While you have highlighted the success of countries like South Africa and Rwanda, it seems many of other African nations haven't been able to utilize the flexibilities to the same extent. Why do you believe this has been the case? What are the key political, economic, or legal hurdles that have prevented more widespread adoption of these measures across the continent? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, quite useful and questions. Regarding application for research funds, I have to clarify my point here. What I said, at that level of negotiating a research funding agreement, it's important that issues of intellectual property are also carefully negotiated and firmed up. Because at that stage, no research has been done. So I didn't say that you have to support with a patent search report at the level where you negotiate a research funding agreement. No, the terms of engagement should include intellectual property ownership. Because someone is coming with money and you're coming with your intellect. So there should be some sort of mutual accommodation in terms of interest. So to clarify that, so what I meant was you need to negotiate ownership arrangement of intellectual property at that preliminary stages of negotiating a research fund. Now, regarding the patent search, that is the requirement which I've suggested at the level when a proposal is presented. Because you accept a proposal in a scientific or technological field once you are sure that there is something which new is about to come. So my argument is, then he should support, or she should support with a simple patent search report. That in fact, even in the patent database, what I'm proposing to investigate is not fully covered, or is not covered at all. So the supporting document will be a patent database. We have patents in the Philippines, in China, in Germany. They are all dealing with this, not in a context which I'm about to research or engage with. So that's number one. So it's a matter of clarity regarding the Diana question. Tumelang, interesting, the TRIPS flexibilities. What are the setbacks? Why other countries are not able to use it? There are a lot of studies which have been done regarding African or developing countries' ability to use intellectual property flexibilities. I did a research in 2012 with companies here in Tanzania, pharmaceutical companies. Then I went to them and said, are you aware that you can use pharmaceutical patents which are protected elsewhere, and given the fact that the whole production is done in Tanzania, being an LDC, you can use it without any illegal repercussions? They said, no, we don't. We always pay a lot of money in licensing. He said, no, there is no obligation to protect pharmaceutical patent for LDCs. That is the exception within the trade-related aspects of intellectual property, the agreement. The problem is maybe within our national IP offices. We need to preach this. We need to populate this, such that users are becoming aware of that. In Rwanda, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, what they did, they are facing a societal problem, a big one. And they come to realize the solution lies in a patent which is protected. Now, the problem which was normally hindering other countries to use, there was a requirement of proving you have domestic manufacturing capacity in order to be able to use flexibilities. But that requirement is no longer there. A country may invoke flexibilities and still be able to use external manufacturing capacity as long as the produce will be used within a particular country to address a particular societal problem. So to Itumelang, I would say we need to continue awareness programs to make sure that issues of intellectual property, particularly flexibilities, are well understood, and the country must have a strategy in terms of how to use it in a manner that supports development.
Thank you, Prof. Colleagues, we are going to draw this discussion to a close, but I would like you to permit me to have at least one question. And that question really has to do with the fact that our universities are often the centers of IP creation. And yet when you started your conversation here, you highlighted the fact that most countries are now positioning themselves as knowledge-based economies. And so inevitably, that must mean that we must interface with our surrounding communities. And in any case, to demonstrate impact for the work that we do, we must work with communities. So how do we design frameworks that allow communities to also benefit from IP protection and commercialization, given that the expertise for IP protection and commercialization is in the universities?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good one. One of my concluding point was, let's go to the grassroots level and get rid of this ivory tower thing. That's university's ivory tower. You have to engage with the local community, CBOs, community-based organizations, incubation systems. I think these kind of approach are now bringing these innovators at the community level to be part and parcel of the university undertaking. I'm looking to my friend Asenga. Asenga, yeah. Can you stand up? Yes, he's one of the examples where he's engaging with the University of Dar es Salaam, and he's having a very interesting innovation, and the university is supporting him. Now, the extent of this engagement, maybe that should be the question. At the institution, the university will need to have a more, what we call, thorough, a more broader engagement, and maybe the government need to chip up. We engage with the government and make it possible. We know some of the universities, they have what we call MOUs with some of the NGOs, yes, who are supporting innovators and startups. But again, looking at the impact, you find it's still not significant, given the fact that we have a wide array of innovators at the grassroots level who have got brilliant ideas, but they don't have a proper guide in terms of navigating through all these processes up to the point where they have an IP or they can transact at the commercial level. Recently, I was handling a case, very sad case, where a startup shared the information with one of the financial institutions. It's an interesting proposition, but they just discussed, shared the document, and this other institution said, we're not interested. Yeah. 3 months later, they're using it. So these are the kind of issues which are confronting our society. I think as the universities, we need to see ways through which we can populate our approaches in terms of the available support systems, but it will need a bit of funding where if the government can chip in, we'll be able to engage with more and more innovators at the community level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me that this has been a thoroughly engaging public lecture. It is incredible to note how quickly time goes when you're having fun. It's been almost 3 hours. So please join me in thanking Professor Mokeche for a brilliant, brilliant lecture.
Thank you very much, Professor Mokaje, and thank you, Dr. Kwezi. And I would like you to follow again here for our closing remarks. On my timetable, it's you, Dr. Kwezi. Yes.
Oh, that's a All right. Okay, so it's often said that one must be ever ready. I wasn't expecting that. Vice Chancellor, Major Generals, DVCs of Arua, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and those joining on the Zoom platform. It's been a wonderful engagement, and I would like us to thank our keynote speaker one more time. You've certainly given us a lot to think about, from how we need to infuse matters of entrepreneurship and IP protection from as early as primary school, and you proceeded to give us examples of countries that are already implementing this and doing so successfully, to how we almost need a recalibration as research managers and as research leaders in our institutions for broader individual, institutional, community, and ultimately continental benefit. So on behalf of all of us at Arua, I thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of this lecture.
And for the final end, I would like to welcome Dr. Agustina Alexander for a vote of thanks. And maybe she has something to give us.
Wow, that has been one of the excellent lecture that I've had before. Thank you so much, Dean of Salma. And I'm just standing here just to give the vote of thanks. The Vice Chancellor, Professor Anangise, the Secretary General of Arua, Professor John Gapong, our esteemed guest speaker, Professor Mwakaje, head of institutions and meter corps who are here, distinguished Deputy Vice Chancellor from Arua member institutions, and colleagues. Let me land on the protocol that has already been established. So I stand here on behalf of the University of Dar es Salaam just to extend our gratitude at the closing of this third Arua Annual Distinguished Public Lecture on Intellectual Properties, Rights and Research Management. So let me start by extend our appreciation to the Vice Chancellor and the entire management of the University of Dar es Salaam for agreeing to host this occasion, where it provides us with a platform to engage in a very meaningful way, but also discuss issues of paramount importance. We extend our deep appreciation to Arua Secretariat, as well as the Arua Deputy Vice Chancellors responsible for research, for selecting the University of Dar es Salaam as the host of this year lecture, but also the host for the DVC's annual meeting that took place yesterday. So we take this as a mark of confidence to our institution, but also recognition of our collective commitment toward advancing research and innovation on the continent. So again, I'm gonna thank our today's guest speaker, Professor Mwakaje, for his excellent, insightful, and I might say it was thought-provoking, as he put it himself, which has enriched our perspective on IP, but also deepened our understanding of the importance of IP in driving Africa's research and development agenda. I also like to recognize and also thank the invited guests. We had head of public and private institution. Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence. We have readers from university readers, we have academic staff, researchers, student practitioners, all participants who are here physically and those who are following us online. Thank you so much for joining us. Your engagements and enthusiasm has added value to this conversation and also moving the agenda of in African research. So as we conclude, I warmly invite you all to proceed to the lobby outside where we have refreshments and networking, and we can also continue our exchanging ideas in a more informal atmosphere. Thank you so much once again, and let us carry forward the spirit of collaboration that this public lecture has ignited. Thank you so much.
And just before we go for refreshments, I would like, it's time for a group photo. And we're going to have 5 photos, group sessions. I would like to call upon Secretary General, Professor John, and Vice Chancellor from University of Dar es Salaam, Professor Anangisye, our guest speaker, Professor Mwakaje, DVC Research, Professor Boniface, Professor Obu, the one who gave the citation, and Dr. Mzilikazi, and General Ibuge at the stage for a group photo. Yes, please. As they are taking the stage, the next photos will be prepared will be with our Arua team. And the third one is diplomats and government officials who are here. And that will be our first photo, and the next photo will be with the Arua team. Please welcome the Arua team. Yes, the DVCs and the representatives of the DVCs. All the DVCs from the Arua universities. Wait. You can come on this side. This side, please. Yes. Mm-hmm. As they're getting their picture, please, diplomats and government officials, you can be prepared. Diplomats, government officials. Yes, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. No. Yeah. Thank you very much. I would like to call upon deans, principals, and directors from the University of Dar es Salaam. I'll take another one. Okay. Thank you very much. Just one extra photo for head of departments, head of units, and professors from the University of Dar es Salaam. Head of departments, head of units, and professors. Thank you. Photos, wait a little bit. We're waiting for Kilo. Okay, chop. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, High Table. Now we can proceed to the front of the building. And for everybody, thank you very much. Karibuni tena Chuo Kikuu cha Dar es Salaam.
It was good for me to meet with you. No, thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Dar es Salaam. Good evening, Africa. This was university happening here in the University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. So the university lecture about the intellectual property. So Arua was established in top research universities. And now we're going to talk to the host of this conference, the gathering.
Thank you so much.
Okay, what is the role of the University of Dar es Salaam for preparing this gathering?
My name is Nelson Boniface, Professor of Geology and the Deputy Vice Chancellor Research of the University of Dar es Salaam. Today, we are honored at the University of Dar es Salaam to host the Arua's General Annual Public Lecture, which is usually held each year. Arua is the Alliance of African Research Intensive Universities, with members almost 20, and the University of Dar es Salaam being the co-founder. We work together on research, innovation, to create knowledge for Africa. So yesterday, 2025, we had a meeting of Deputy Vice Chancellors dealing with the academics, research, and the internationalization to deliberate on issues that are facing Africa and the continent as well. But the role of the University of Dar es Salaam was to host this prestigious event and the public lecture. And the speaker was our own I would say professor intellectual properties.
I've gone through the history of Arua. It was established in 2015. So is it the first time to be hosted in the University of Dar es Salaam?
Actually, no. Before it has been there. I mean, in terms of hosting, because we do rotate. We rotate in member universities. We have been in Pretoria, we have been in West Africa, we have been in Kenya, Uganda, etc. So we rotate year after year. So this is not the first time.
And what are the key expectations from this gathering today?
As we put the agenda together, we co-create, supervise PhD together, do research together, and exchange staff. And this is a milestone where when we co-create, it means that we create funds together. We can have research fund within a certain pool and enable even early career researchers to work among these universities. And we collaborate with Europe. For instance, we have more than 24 universities in European Union that are working with Arua. So we send our early career researchers, staff and students in those universities, of which we co-supervise those students with those universities, but with our researchers within the Arua framework.
Thank you so much, sir, and congratulations for the preparation.
Thank you so much.
And all the best. Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen who are following us online via YouTube channel, Mlimani Media UDSM, our Instagram channel, and on Facebook. Thank you so much. And now we have our keynote speaker that was presenting today. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much.
Please introduce yourself.
Saudin Mwakaje, Associate Professor of Law at the University of Dar es Salaam. And today I was given the privilege of being a keynote speaker.
Okay, being the third annual gathering, so what were the key expectations on your presentation?
Well, of course, the subjects. Arua is still expanding, but the subject that we agreed that I should present on intellectual property is one of the topical issues now, not only in Africa but across the world. So we have focused our discussion on how this should influence our research management approaches at the universities, the to-do and not-to-do list. So we had quite an engaging session pointing out some of the setbacks that African universities are facing, but also the opportunities and the prospects. And we hope out of this we'll be able to see the universities adopting a different roadmap in terms of using research management and intellectual property in a manner that supports national development.
I've been following on your speech. Can you please take us to the key recommendation that you have said?
Number one is to demystify the intellectual property, to make it simple, because the way it is understood by many people is this is a complicated subject, and we don't want to make it a complicated subject. Number two, it's important to have the capacity building initiatives within our institution, particularly research managers should have a knowledge of intellectual property, be able to negotiate research agreements, be able to negotiate licensing agreements when they research, they sell out research outputs. So if we are able to do that, then our university will stand to benefit. But also important is to understand the current dynamics which is taking place in Africa and across beyond Africa, where we see a lot of emphasis on intellectual property management. Intellectual property is an agenda for Africa development. So that was the key point in terms of making university appreciate where we are, the condition and circumstances we are operating, and moving forward, what lies ahead in the road that we follow.
Now, Professor, what is your message to the young researchers?
Young researchers, I would like to encourage them to continue with what they're doing, but appreciating that what they're doing may have more meaning and value than what they think, as long as they apply intellectual property. We've seen some researchers who have done just a single research and was a breakthrough technology. It has changed their fortunes in terms of benefiting financially, but most important, ability to influence societal development, solve societal problems. So I think if we focus on that and apply intellectual property, we'll be seeing intellectual property not as a hindrance, rather as an enabler to make sure that our society benefits, researchers benefits, then the country as a whole will benefit.
Thank you so much, Professor.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was the message to young researchers from the keynote speech of today's gathering. Now we will have another guest here. We will have another guest from South Africa. She will also come to share her experience around this Arua gathering today. And I would like to thank the online audience that were following us online via our YouTube channel, Mlimani TV UDSM, our social media channel on Instagram, Mlimani Media UDSM Official, and Mlimani Radio, the University of Dar es Salaam. My name is Sakina Chambulilo. I was with you throughout the session. Now, before we speak to our lecture from the South Africa, I would like also to repeat again. So Arua, this is the African Research Universities Alliance. So it gathers great African minds from different universities. Welcome.
Is it live?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay, it's okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Very well. And yourself?
I'm good. How do you feel to be here at the Arua conference?
It's been a wonderful opportunity. We had our meeting yesterday, the Arua DVC's meeting. We were beautifully hosted by Professor Nelson Boniface, and in the evening he showed us a little bit of the city. We had very beautiful and fruitful engagements and deliberations, also planning for further engagements going into the next year. So it's been a very, very good...
Excuse me. Please introduce yourself, sorry.
All right, my name is Dr. Kwezi Mziligazi. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor responsible for research, innovation and strategic partnerships at Rhodes University in South Africa. Okay.
Yes.
Should we do that again?
No, you should continue.
All right. So she's just asked me to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Kwezi Mzilikazi. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor responsible for research, innovation and strategic partnerships at Rhodes University in South Africa, and we are a member of the Arua Alliance.
What is your key message you're taking it out from the Arua conference this year?
The value of collaboration, and that we must continue to build capacity amongst our African universities. What often happens is that we're very good at collaborating with the global north, but not so good at collaborating amongst each other. We do very well to develop capacity, but we now need to collaborate more on different areas of research, as well as look further than just doctoral training and start worrying about postdoctoral fellows, early career academics, and also how those early career academics are going to transition into mid-career and established researchers. So there's still a lot of work to do in the future.
Now, for the young researchers and innovators, what is your message?
The future looks bright. Please continue. There is no greater privilege than being paid to explore your own ideas. It is really a privilege to be a researcher. So please continue.
Thank you so much, and welcome to Tanzania.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was all for today. My name is Sakina Chambulilo from Mlimani Media, the University of Dar es Salaam. This was Arua Conference, the African Researchers University Alliance. Thank you so much. So much, and welcome to